Hello, we're live. I'm Karen Holst, co-author of Start Within, and I have with me my co-author, Douglas Ferguson.
Howdy.
Hi there. And also we're talking today with Associate Professor at Pepperdine, Mark Tribbitt. He teaches strategic management. Thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So we initially met through another innovator and her work, and just in having conversation with you was totally clicking, thinking about the work that you do in both mentoring and teaching your MBA classes and students, but also in working with companies and helping them manage, their strategies, especially in this moment that we're in. So I've been excited to have this conversation.
Me too.
To kick it off, I think one thing that stood out early on is how you approach teaching people to be innovative. And you're doing it as a professor, as a mentor, but we all do it in our work, because we're trying to bring our team members along or we're trying to lead teams. So I think there's a lot to apply no matter what your role is. But I just wanted to get a little bit more around that from you. Like what does that mean?
Sure. I think, one of the questions that I ask my students very often in class is, can you teach people to be innovative? And I love to see how many people raise their hands, which is very few, right? Most people think you either got it or you don't got it. And so I'm a big fan and believer that you actually can teach it. Can you teach somebody to be, at the opposite end of the scale and just kind of create something out of nothing? Maybe not, but you can move that innovation needle, that entrepreneurial needle in people. And so one of the things that I love to do in my classes is I love to get them to challenge assumptions. I love to put things in front of them and get them to think critically and more broadly. And that is teaching MBA students. That is something that's actually a little bit harder to do than you might think, right? Most are there, they've finished undergrad, they've got careers, and they've had success doing things a certain way. And so they do everything through that lens. And I teach the capstone course, so the last course in their program. So it's further embedded in them. And so I spend probably most of the semester trying to break it, trying to actually get them out of that thinking that for some has made them very successful. So they're like, why would I change? And so there's a lot around that, a lot of discussion around that, a lot of challenging the day-to-day assumptions. One of my favorite things is in graduate school, you do case studies, you do case study analyses. And it's fascinating to me to watch how many people think that they're a genius because they read a case that's 3 years old and they say about Apple and they say, this is what I would do. And Apple did it. And so I'm a genius. I like to actually break it up a little bit. And I've just come in with some stories of something that happened in the news today. A company reported this or that. And then I say, okay, you're the CEO. What would you do? And it's amazing the blank stares. People kind of, they're like, well, I need something to tell me what I should do. And I'm like, no, that's what innovation is all about. Digging in and coming up with your own solutions, being creative.
Yeah, absolutely. That's super inspiring, the way that you couch it in what's really happening versus something that already has the answer written out for you. And I think there's so many different directions it could take as far as, you hear this new case because it's just coming out and you get students' perspectives and the conversation is a big part of it, right? The community that you're creating and talking about it and hearing other perspectives and people with different backgrounds talking about it, which I think is the key to this kind of work, is trying to diversify who you're bringing to the table in your, frameworks that you are learning from. So I really like that. And as they're thinking about taking this to their jobs today, what are some, we talked about start within, that we have some frameworks within there and exercises, but what are some ways to kind of unlock this, the assumptions, the biases that are built in us? How do you kind of start to apply that outside of the classroom in your day-to-day work?
That's a great question. One of the big things you said it a second ago is this idea of understanding diversity. And I think that if you can actually step out of your own bubble and get out of your own head and meet and learn and talk to different people with different perspectives, it just adds this level of understanding that just helps you uncover these problems, right? When we think about innovation, if you talk to innovation scholars, right, they say it's about uncovering a pain, right? Addressing a pain in the marketplace. And when you talk to different people, you figure out those different pains that exist, right? It's really funny. I grew up on the East Coast, and now I live on the West Coast. So I'm kind of the bi-coastal, kind of have those East Coast, West Coast experiences. Well, there's a whole middle of the country that, thinks differently, acts differently in different situations than me. And so what I always say to my students is, whatever you experience and know, you apply as the norm to everything, to everyone, right? And I always try to get them to understand the world is bigger than just you and your experiences. And that's what, it's not necessarily in a framework per se, but that's the thing that I try to get them to understand. So I know in your book, you talked about, one of the things that made me smile, you talked about the person who had the idea about the landscape and the haircutting, right? And so because that was a pain that she needed for her mother, she was like, this is something that everybody would be interested in. And that probably isn't true, right? And that's okay. But it's understanding that, and understanding that I have one perspective and I need to talk to people with multiple different perspectives so that I get a fuller grasp of what's going on, that really can add value and truly make you this, as you say, this innovative thinker, this entrepreneurial thinker.
Absolutely. And you do this too. A layer of that is asking questions. Like you're talking about going out and gathering insights and trying to change perspective. You can even boil it down and simply say, go out and ask questions. Like it can be daunting to say, go and get the insights or change your perspective and your view. But it's really hard not to get insights and change your perspective and view if you're listening and you're asking questions. And we all need to do more of that. There's just more listening, more asking questions. I love it.
Yeah, and I think that it's also I think people make it more complicated than it needs to be. I haven't done it in a while, especially with COVID, but I used to do this exercise in class where I would tell the students, okay, you've got 30 minutes, you're in groups. I want you, don't leave campus, but leave the classroom, walk around and think about an idea, a business idea that you could pop up. And I want you to just walk around and think about, you drive to campus, you park in this parking lot, this is what the building looks like, and then come back with some ideas. And it's really interesting. One group a couple of years ago, they did it and they came back, and by the end of the term, they started a business with a portable car washing business, right? And they were like, one of the things, I love my car. It sits outside for 8 hours when I take class all day, and it gets dusty and dirty, and I don't have time to go get it washed. And so they created this business, right? And it literally just came out of walk around the campus and see what makes sense to you. So it's leveraging your experience and asking questions is so important. It's huge.
It's like I really resonated with your point around people's lived experience and the perception that gives them of the world. And I'd run across some research. I can't remember whose it was now. I'll have to go look it up. But it was called Resistance to Learning. And and when I read it, it immediately reminded me of the curse of knowledge, right? The more we know, the more we are unwilling to like unlearn that stuff and think of other stuff. And so I'm curious, what are some ways that because I'm sure you run into that all the time with your students, like they just think it has to be this way because this is what I've seen. Like, what are some ways that you help them bust out of that?
I'm a big believer in storytelling, and I'm a big believer in sharing my missteps, and then applying them in a way that will get them to look introspectively. One of the things I say all the time, especially to my MBA students and to the ones that are really tied into that certain knowledge, I'll tease them a little bit and I'll say, you like knowing stuff. you don't like learning stuff. and that's true of a lot of people, right? They really are into that. Like, the more I know, the more I kind of have this cape that I can add to me, but learning stuff makes me vulnerable, right? And so I try to get them to understand that it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to be, and it's okay to be wrong too. I actually, in class, I am immediate to say, hey, I was wrong, and some of my colleagues, we talk about, how we teach, and in this day of technology, I have colleagues that say, I don't let them open their laptops. I want their eyes on me. I want them focused in on me. And I don't want them checking my stuff, right? I don't want them checking me to see if I'm wrong. And I always, this is a little bit arrogant, but I always say, I want them to check, because most of the time I feel like I'm right. And so that builds some credibility early, right? But also sometimes they'll add an element just because they're looking at their, laptop and perusing things, and it'll take our class in a direction because they came up with some nugget that professors not all knowing, right? So they'll come up with some nugget that I didn't know of or forgot about, and it'll take it in a whole different direction. So it's that idea that, our knowledge is currency, and people they hold on to it like somebody who's frugal holds on to a dollar bill, right? Spend it, I say. You may get more out of it.
Yeah. I love that.
I love that. I love that. And how has all of this shifted as you're talking to students and they're thinking about this moment that we're in, wherever they are in their career? It's very clear things are not. There's ambiguity in our future.
Yes. And
how long it lasts, we don't know. Like, how are your students grappling with that, and how are you helping them through this as a semester?
Yeah. So it is definitely a struggle. It is definitely a different time that we're in. COVID has wreaked havoc on education, right? And for me personally, one of my struggles, one of the things that I loved is just the impromptu, right? Before class, you sit in class and you talk to people about different things they have going on. And that kind of has gone away in some way. And so there's that side of things. And then students are really struggling with this whole idea of this ambiguous environment that we live in, and really trying with all their might to put bookends on it. And so I try to ease their tension with understanding that the world is that way, right? It's I'm sure you guys know the book Who Moved My Cheese, right? That whole idea of managing through ambiguity. The only constant is change. I hate cliches, but I'm a big cliche user and believer. They really have knowledge in them. And so it's really trying to help them to understand that the world may never go back to what we knew it to be, but that's okay. There's still room in it for us to figure out where we belong and where we fit. But there is, true as a strategist, right? There is that whole amount of work that leads into really trying to figure it out, right? Trying to figure out what the bookends are. And so we do a lot of conversation, case studies, discussions around that for me, with the mindset of making them feel more comfortable or more at ease with ambiguity. Even with my work assignments, they have assignments that they have to do in class, and my approach is very basic instructions, end result, but you do it the way that works best for you, figure out the best way. And there are students that they cannot stand that. They tell me exactly what you want, give me the recipe, and I'll give it back to you. And I always say to them, if I told you exactly what to do, I could do it myself. And that's what your boss is going to think, right? And so you will meet expectations if I tell you exactly what to do and you do it. But if you rely on what you know and your skills and bring to the table what you think is appropriate, there's a lot of value. Because now, as manager, I can be freed up to do other things, and I can trust you to do these tasks, which will then give me more confidence in you, then ultimately promote you, and all those types of things. So those are some of the ways that I try to manage and help my students through this, this ambiguity and managing it. And some struggle with that, but those that get it, they really get it. And I get a lot of thank yous afterwards. Like, oh, I like that approach. I didn't get it at the time, but I like it now.
Excellent.
Yeah, I love the why for that. Thank you for that.
Sure,
That's great.
So good. And I just realized we hit 15 minutes. I know we could go on and on forever, and we knew this would go by quickly. So much good stuff here, and lots of wisdom and management for sure there at the end. So I want to just thank folks for listening in, and we come on LinkedIn Live at least once a week or so, and we'll host someone that's read the book or working in innovation and doing this kind of work, and we have a conversation with them. So come join us again sometime in the future.
Awesome. Thank you.